everybody. My name is Eric Grubaugh. I run Stoic Software, where I am a SuiteScript coach, and I am here today with Jeff Rutledge, one of Salto's customer engineers, to explore some of Salto's more advanced DevOps automation type features. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Hey, it's a pleasure, as always. Thank you, Eric. I'm doing well. Like I said before, it's a
Good.
bright sunny day here, so it makes me happy to be able to hang out with some cool folks while we're enjoying the day.
I'll do a little bit of housekeeping here before we get into the demonstration, the conversation. Salto is not a consulting company looking to sell you any services. They are a software company that has built the DevOps platform that we'll be demonstrating today. And you can check out the platform for yourself with a completely free 30-day trial over at salto.io. Second, there should be a poll open in Zoom right now, and your answers there will help us tailor the conversation a little bit to sort of skill, experience, knowledge levels, that sort of thing. We'd appreciate your participation there. Third, we have scheduled a full hour for this, but we are reserving most of that, hopefully, to answer your questions. So the chat and the Q&A are both open in Zoom. I'll be keeping an eye on those throughout the presentation. So at any point, if you have a question for Jeff or for myself, go ahead and drop that in the Q&A tab in Zoom. That's the easiest way for me to keep track of the questions. And finally, this session is being recorded. So shortly after we wrap up, it will be emailed out to everyone who registered and attended, of course, as well. And then eventually it will also be posted to Salto's YouTube channel for reference later. All right. That is all I have for my scripted announcements. Jeff, are
All right.
you ready?
Yeah, I am ready.
I will turn the reins to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm looking at the poll results and it's great. What I love to see is that there's a good mix here of folks who have some good SCI/CD experience up to an 8. Good, no 9s and 10s, which is great because you guys would show me up anyways. Even you 8s and 7s are probably as good at giving this presentation as I am. So, but I like to see that there's a lot of folks out there who are still really trying to understand how CI/CD might fit into, particularly into a NetSuite configuration process. So I'm going to share that with everyone today, and I'd like to kind of start around some discussion. I will put up a screen just so that we've got to talk about. Oops, that's the wrong one. This is the right one here. This is something that, we call these pipelines, and then a lot of folks in the industry call these pipelines. And really what it is expresses the environments that are available for developers to use for testing and UAT, and then of course the production on the far right. Just a minute, I need to move my Zoom stuff around because I can't see anything on my screen. Also, that poll is still open. I can minimize that. There we go. Excellent. Okay. So we can see that I've got a dev environment. This is the dev environment for NetSuite. It's a live NetSuite environment. I've got a UAT environment that I'm connected to as well. Oops, sorry. And I've got a production environment. And what we're seeing here is an overall view of all the work that's going on between these environments. So these drafts here are deployments. They are comparisons between, say, dev and UAT, where we were expressing some differences and we wanted to eliminate those differences. We're also getting that. So actually, before I move on from there, this is the kind of the admin UI based changes that NetSuite admins are highly accustomed to, right? Like most NetSuite admins spend a lot of time in the UI making changes to workflows and save searches, etc. There's another group which sometimes overlaps and sometimes doesn't, which is the developers who are writing SuiteScripts. And so that group out there, typically, in a lot of my customers, they're sort of separate. Sometimes they do the same work as the admins do, but oftentimes they're separated. And yet there's this need to kind of pull in the process into a single process rather than two separate processes, right? If you have a bunch of admins going in modifying save searches, and then there's a bunch of people out there writing SuiteScripts, and maybe those SuiteScripts reference some of the same objects or use the save searches themselves, etc. We get this sort of rift between those two worlds, and that can cause some communications breakdowns and some conflicts and things like that. And so one thing that Salto is trying to do is to bring these two worlds together and give a sort of a release team. If you think of the overall team that's trying to add functionality to NetSuite, think of that as like the release team or the overall, the functional improvement team. We want to give them a single view of those two worlds and watch things progress from comparing dev to UAT, but also writing some suite scripts, having those things flow into UAT and being able to see all of the deployments that have been run into UAT, and then promote them up through the rest of the stack, right? So I can grab some of these and promote them right from here too. So this allows us to kind of drive the function of releasing new functionality into NetSuite, all from this one pipeline view. So that's where I wanted to start. Eric, do you have any comments about this, or are there any questions coming in from the audience so far?
No questions yet. I did want to comment. We're sort of jumping right in. We're kind of skipping all the what is Salto or the
Yeah,
basics
sure.
of Salto. If you are wildly confused, we did several demos last year of what is Salto and going through some of the major features, sort of the
Yep.
fundamental features of Salto, and all of those are up on Salto's YouTube channel.
Yep.
Um, so
Yep.
we're just kind of
Excellent. Thank
jumping right into the more technical, um,
Yeah.
advanced features, I would say here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Thanks for the reminder on that. And I do want to keep this discussion not just about, Salto and the features, but about the process of doing NetSuite customizations and improvements. So do chime in with questions you've got, in the Q&A or the chat. And Eric, if you just keep an eye on that and let me know if I have some outstanding stuff that I need to answer. And then also,
of
I
course.
did want to say we're going to get into kind of the what is Salto thing as we go. We're starting from a different point than our other demonstrations. Those other demonstrations started from the point of like, no one knows what Salto is, but hopefully you've been to one or two of ours before, or certainly go and have a look at the previous ones. But I am gonna get into bits and pieces of the Salto functionality as part of the overall demonstration too.
Great.
Okay, cool. So first point I wanted to make was that we are kind of consolidating the process of making NetSuite updates and NetSuite improvements, NetSuite configurations into a single view for leaders to see, for release managers to control the process, and for developers and admins to work together on the effort of customizing NetSuite. Cool. So this is the overall view. Now, what we're seeing here are the environments, right? Dev UAT prod, the deployments that are waiting to go, the deployments that have been deployed into the environments. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the deployments of an admin team who's creating some saved searches, and they've gone
I was just
into
about to ask.
yeah, great. But they've gone into NetSuite. They've made some changes in the dev environment. Okay. And the dev environment is sort of it's the sandbox. It's where developers do their unit testing, and it's where the administrative folks do all of their creation of functionality. Once it's created, then what we do is we compare the dev environment to UAT, and that allows us to create these comparisons and deployments. So I'm going to show you one of those now. So here are the list of deployments in my waiting to go into my UAT environment. So I'm currently selected my UAT environment. I've got a couple of things that are waiting to be deployed. One of them is, you can see it's an SFDX pull request. So this is a developer focused change, and this is the admin focused change. So I'm going to come into the admin focused change just to show you what it looks like to create a deployment in Salto. And what happens is you get a comparison between your source and your target. So in this case, dev and UAT are being compared. And we're going to provide a big list of changes that if you wanted a certain saved search or whatever to be copied over, we'll copy that over. And if there's a lot of things that you don't want to have copied over. So these are all the differences between dev and UAT. Lots of them here, right? There's 30 custom record differences. Let me close this up. There's a bunch of file cabinet differences. these are the configuration records, things like save searches, right? There's 59 differences in save searches. Some of those I think are relevant to what I'm doing right now, so I'm selecting that for a deployment. Others might be, but and so I'm I'm kind of searching through this list here for things that are relevant to the deployment I'm trying to do, and we can get a sort of a side-by-side comparison about exactly what's different between the source and the target environment. So on a line-by-line basis, we can see that this has a different audience flag set, for example, right? So this might be relevant to my deployment, or it might not. And so the idea here is that we go through a process of selecting elements that are relevant to things that I'm doing. And so in this case, I selected a bunch of transaction custom body fields and a save search. And in fact, those had a dependency on a custom record. And so I was kind of asked to bring in the custom record. So if I do this, I think it's they're included by I've forgotten what it is. But if we choose things to deploy, I can make an example here of a sales order. How about GWR? So there. Okay, I've got a workflow here, for example, right? It's not being currently included, but I can determine that, hey, this is relevant to what I want to do, and so I can pull it in here as well. And it's going to remind me of all the things that I'm depending on, and reminding me to pull those into. So just a very quick overview of this comparison process that admins can go through to do their work in deploying new functionality to Salto. So you do
Yeah.
the
Real
comparison, you
quick,
select some elements, etc. Yep, go ahead.
I want to jump in here with a question from Tom.
Okay, hey
Is
Tom.
Salto pulling the raw data from both environments and comparing them, or are you sort of identifying ahead of time what what objects to compare?
Yeah, great question. So in this case, this is the entire these are the entire a comparison of the two raw configurations. We capture the raw configuration of each NetSuite environment on a regular basis in a process called a fetch. And so this is the overall differences between the two. And I can pick and choose the pieces that I want to include. So that's kind of the administrative view. And I can search, I can find all the stuff that have my initials in it. So I can say, hey, maybe I need these fields too, for example. So I can search and find things that might be further relevant. Oh, that's funny. I've been getting that a little bit today. And then so this is the raw. Now the other way to do it is through pull requests, and I'll go through that in a minute. And they're very specific, right? So when I do a pull request, it identifies exactly the changes that I'm requesting via that pull request.
Yeah. So
Um,
it is just to put a really fine point on it. It is by default, it is pulling almost everything in the two accounts and comparing them. You
yeah.
can sort of tune what gets fetched. You can restrict certain things from getting fetched. If you don't want Salto to manage, some aspect of the configuration, you can tune that. But by default, if you just go into Salto and set this up, it's going to look at pretty much everything it can in both accounts and do
Mhm.
the live. It's a live comparison, live-ish, like you said. It's doing a fetch, it's making snapshots, and it's comparing those
Yeah,
snapshots.
you got it. Yep. So this deployment is ready to go. I'm just going to kick it off, and it will do its thing to make the changes to the UAT environment according to those selections, according to the differences between dev and UAT. In this case, it's adding some save searches, a custom record, and some transaction body fields. I'm going to go over to whoops, one here. Let me go to this guy. So the next process is that was the administrative changes, right? When you make a change to a custom record and you want to deploy that, you make a change in the UI, that is. The other activity that's going on in many NetSuite environments is this developer-driven activity of creating suite scripts, and this is how it ends up. And I'm gonna show you where it starts, and that is usually in an IDE like VS Code or WebStorm, whichever you like. My Zoom stuff out of the way again. Here we go. Okay. So I've got, SDF projects that look like SDF projects, and right now I'm connected to my dev account for doing deployment. So I can say deploy the project, and that's going to deploy it to my dev account where I can do unit testing, etc. Once I'm happy with the way it all works, my next step is to say, okay, I want to actually create a pull request out of this. And so if I make changes, for example, I think I might have a pull request already going here. Let me just double check. Maybe not. Um, so if I make changes here into my code, say I just I want to add in some whatever. I pretend this is actual code, and I'm just inserting in some comments. But pretend like this is actually creating new functionality. So I'd come in here and I'd make changes to my code, and this is okay, Jeff. How's that? Um, and so this is the developer experience. And one of the things about Salto that we're trying to do is to ensure that the developer experience is preserved, right? And this is how developers like to work. They create a branch, they alter some code, they commit their check-ins, they commit that code to through GitHub, and then they would sync those changes up into the pull request. For example, I think there is already a pull request going on this one, and those changes then get reflected up in Salto. So this thing here is actually dependent on a pull request. And so as I make changes to that pull request, we'll see those changes get updated here. And the idea here is simply that the developers have a process that they use right now. They like to live in this UI. We want them to continue to live in this UI. And they do all the same things they usually do. They branch, they change code, they commit, they create pull requests to ask for that code to be deployed into UAT. And all that results in stuff in our pipeline, right? The stuff happens here that I can now act on and say yes, go ahead and run this deployment here. I want you to actually the UAT updates are good. The Jira ticket is being updated, right? So if I go back to Jira, I should be able to see these things in Jira and I can follow them in the Jira ticket. Let me see. Let me go out on a limb here and see if it's happening. Yeah. So here's my Jira ticket, right? Should be in progress. BAM 15 is the one I've been working on. There's a few things going on in this one, right? So there's actually a few pull requests on this one. If I open this thing up, I can see all the stuff that has been conducted before, and I can have a look at this pull request and say, all right, cool. This is a pull request. It's got some conversation around it. It's got some approvals. Here are the files to be changed. I can add my review in here. If it wasn't, I'd have to do it not as me, but as someone else because I can't review my own code. But you can see exactly what's going on, right? You can see I added bit of code there, so I can do the review as the developer community already likes to do it. And once that's done, we come back, and we review the changes that are part of the Jira ticket. We come back to the deployment, and we actually say, all right, go ahead and deploy that now. Everything looks good. We're ready to go. You can continue with the next phase. Oops, that was the wrong screen. This is the screen I wanted to do. See, the law of demos. I think someone did a an update today. Either that or the internet is bugging me because Slack was down today as well. So there's something in the winds of the internet that are kind of causing me to stumble on a couple things. So apologies for that. Cool. So let's have a discussion on that. So Eric, how does this
Yeah.
compare to like a typical way of doing things?
Well, I think it's important. I think there's a really important point here that Salto's not interfering. You didn't have to change your branching structure. You didn't have
Mm.
to change the way you do pull requests. If you're already, following Git flow or whatever branching strategy you might have, Salto just sort of sits on top of your Git repo and just watches. It doesn't enforce any sort of structure on you if you already have a sophisticated flow with branches, with SDF, with your development process. Salto just sort of sits on top and watches and pulls that into, again, this unified view. I think that's really important. So it's already different in that it gives that unified view. If you are a developer or an admin and you've ever worked in one of those environments that Jeff was talking about at the top, where you are sort of two totally separate teams, or there's, some sort of barrier in between, which I have definitely worked on those teams. Those teams have been my clients. it's a real challenge when the dev team is trying to manage objects in their repository, but administrators also have to change them outside the repository. It's a mess. It can be a real mess. I know that once we had, I was working on a team that had this set up, and we were going through SOX compliance, and we the developers had a bunch of custom records in our SDF repo, and we were making changes, deploying them as we normally would. And then the admins were going through that SOX audit, making tons of permission changes on all the records, locking down controls as they're supposed to do, doing their jobs. And we kept overwriting them. We kept destroying all their permission changes because SDF just, they were making their changes outside of our repo. And so we weren't seeing them. We weren't aware. So we just kept overriding all their changes. They had to redo all their permission changes. It was
Yeah.
a mess, complete mess, especially when you're trying to go through a SOX audit. That's a
Yeah.
huge mess. And so
Yeah.
we didn't have this unified view where, yeah, we're making changes sort of from two different processes, two different sources, but Salto is pulling them all together, giving us one unified
Mhm.
view of that where we can do sort of the analysis of these two changes here have a conflict, and how do we resolve that conflict when one is outside of the repository and one is inside.
Yeah.
So that's a major difference right there. That unified view, even though both sides, both teams are following different processes to make those changes. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the conflicts you mentioned too, there's actually some specific functionality in Salto that says, hey, there's two folks trying to deploy something that conflicts with each other. You need to resolve that before you can move forward on it. So there's even some conflict resolution right within Salto.
Yeah, I do
Um,
have a couple of questions here, maybe
yeah,
before
please go
we
for it.
move on. Looks like from Alexander. Is it possible to do version control without Salto?
Without Salto.
Yeah.
Um, of course, right? Like the existing way that folks operate is with an SDF repo, and this SDF repo has branches and versioning on that and commits. So yeah, absolutely, we can do that without
Yep.
Salto. What you can't do though is take that process of SDF updates with where we're coming in here and we're updating a suite script here, and changing its contents, and doing some updates there and committing those changes. Like, you can do all this outside of Salto. This is not Salto at all. This is just GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or Azure DevOps, whichever one you're interested in. They all work great. But once you layer Salto on top of that, what you get is this ability to look at those in concert with a bunch of other kinds of changes as well, and drive them through the process. So for example, the next step after a normally version controlled Git process is complete, and you say, all right, UAT is passed. All right, now I want to push this up into production. That becomes tricky. You can certainly roll your own CI/CD pipelines with SDF. I've seen customers that do that. They uh, I won't be too hyperbolic here. It's not an easy thing to do. If you have real great SDF experts around, that it's a totally possible thing to do. What Salto allows you to do is kind of get that level of functionality and control without having to build your own CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it does.
Good.
So again, to put a real fine point on it, yes, you can do version control without Salto using any Git provider or whatever version control you want to do. That's all possible. SweetScript is code like any other code. You can source control it however you like. Um, and but even if you're not doing version control, or if you are doing version control without Salto already, you can bring in Salto, and it just sort of passively sits on top, doesn't disrupt whatever you're doing already.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely. All right, more
Alexander.
questions?
I have one more from Tom again. what happens when you have to deal with NetSuite's regular releases, big major releases? 2025.1 just dropped. What
Mm-hmm.
happens
Yeah.
with those
Yeah.
big
So
releases?
great question. So what I'd typically do is I would create another one of these. Each one of these are the snapshots of the environments, right? So this is my dev environment, and I can see all the things that are customized here, records, et cetera, all the customizations and UAT and prod. I would add another one here that points to that new the release candidate, or the what's it called,
Release
the
preview. Yep.
the release preview. Thank you. The release previews, we can actually add them in as yet another environment and include them, in fact, in this picture here, as environments to compare and deploy. So at the very least, I can add them in to compare, because they look okay. All right, I got a release preview. I don't know. Does the release preview come as kind of a refresh, in a sense, like it's got all of your stuff in it, typically?
Yeah.
Eric? Yeah.
It's a snapshot of your production account, I believe.
Yeah. Great.
Whenever that release preview goes live, they take a snapshot of production, and that is your release preview.
Yeah, excellent. So we would just add a release preview down here as another environment, and then we could say, all right, let's have a look at production, and I'm going to compare the release preview, release preview, uh, uh, to my production environment, and then I would actually see the differences in the configuration between those as well. So that would be the first thing. We could absolutely incorporate a release preview into this process, and it gives you a lot of great visibility into, like, okay, what has changed between my configuration under version 2024 versus my configuration under 2025.
Yeah, and if you've got in-flight changes, features you're working on developing, once that release preview goes live, you can push them all in there. You can compare the features, see what's different. Really handy. Another question here from Roy. I thought release
Oh, hey, Roy,
preview
I
does
think we've
not.
spoken before.
Yeah, I thought release preview does not allow SDF. So is this possible with Salto?
Well,
I'm not aware of that restriction, actually. I don't. I I've never run into a problem deploying to a release preview account with SDF. Maybe that's
and,
changed. I could be wrong.
and I have connected Salto to release preview accounts for sure. So and Salto does depend on SDF, among other
I
things.
was
But
just about to make that statement as well. Salto uses SDF, so if you can connect Salto to a release preview account, then it must allow SDF.
yeah,
I have not seen that restriction myself before.
could be account by account
Uh,
too.
and one more here from Heidi this time, since we're talking about socks.
Oh,
In a
Heidi.
SOX environment, there are often controls stating a developer cannot deploy their own code, and we
Right,
must be able to demonstrate that the developer did not deploy the code. How
right,
does Salto help you enforce that separation of duties?
right. Great question. So there's a couple of places where that can happen. You might have seen it briefly when I couldn't see here. Where is it? Let me find the right screen here. It's going to be in here. And hang on, I'm going to go to my pull requests. I'm going to look at an open pull request here. You'll notice that in this case, I will be unable to approve this change. And if this change isn't approved, it would not be able to get into UAT. All right. So this is a control on the UAT deployments. It must be reviewed by someone, and you can specify who that someone is. It can be either a specific couple of people, or it can be anyone but me. In my case, it's anyone but me. And so it has to have someone else to approve this through the usual approval processes like GitHub. And the code can only progress into UAT if that approval is met. And so that approval would come from here. I would come into to GitHub, and I would do the approval. In this case, this approve button is actually lit up, so I can actually go and approve that thing now. And so that's the first gate. The second gate is when you are looking at production, right? So the gates for getting things into UAT are usually a little less stringent, and then when you're doing things into production, they get a little bit more stringent. Someone is calling me on Zoom that I have to, or on Slack. I need to get rid of. Otherwise, it's just going to keep making that noise. Bear with me for 1 sec when I get rid of that noise. I wish there was a do not disturb with. Okay, there we go. Pardon me on that. All right, cool. So where was I? Okay, so in production now, there's another gate, and so if I wanted to, let me look at if I go to my production, I look at all my compare and deploys. There's these drafts that are ready to go. They're ready from a sorry, not that one. Let me try a different one. That one is Jira 555. Let's try this one here. That one has that. Okay, well, this one has conflicts too. This one is not ready because it has conflicts. But even if I resolve all those conflicts, let me just really quickly resolve all these conflicts and apply all those conflicts. It's the next thing it's going to check is the pull request mergeable back into the production branch. And if it's not, then I will not be able to proceed with this deployment. And so we get another opportunity for a gate at the UAT to production promotion cycle. So we have, and that one can be, of course, more stringent, right? It can say, all right, it has to be a release manager or a financial person has to include their comments in the approval. So you can see that it says not ready to deploy, and my deploy button is grayed out here, and it's not ready to deploy because it hasn't approved or passed all its validations. So if we go into GitHub, we would see that this thing is still in a state where it's not ready to move forward.
Yeah, I think
Does that
there's
make sense?
another. It does. I think there's a couple things I want to point out here too. If we just
Oh,
go
okay.
look at, can you just look at the history of deployments,
Yeah.
the ones that have already been done? Right
Yep.
here on this list, we can see who made each deployment and when.
Mhm.
So we could use this list in an audit to say the developer is not the one, triggering the deployments, right? If it's an admin or whoever your responsible party is for your deployments,
Mhm.
if they are the ones triggering those through Salto, or if it's your automated system, your CI/CD pipeline, whatever it is, that will show up here.
Yeah,
And so you can prove that the developer who wrote the code is not the one deploying the code.
that's right.
And then if you switch over to like the GitHub, maybe if you are familiar with GitHub Actions and CI/CD, I hope what you're seeing here is that, again, Salto is sort of just sitting on top of your existing process. So if you already have a bunch of GitHub CI/CD type validations in your GitHub Actions, if you are, running automated unit tests, or you need, two approvals from people who aren't the developers, or whatever those gates are that you have before a pull request is ready, all of those stay in place. All of those controls you have stay in place, and Salto respects all of those. The pull request must be ready for merge in order for Salto to say this deployment is deployable. So I
Yep.
think that's really important. If you already have this sophisticated, CI/CD pipeline that uses GitHub Actions or GitLab pipelines, or Bitbucket, I think also calls them pipelines, whichever
Mhm.
provider you're using, Salto respects all of those rules that you already have in place.
Mhm. And if you don't have those, we can point you in the right direction at least to create them. We've got some good sample code for doing this kind of work. And really, I mean, all this, the only Salto bits in this, this ugly piece of code here, you don't ever think you'd have to worry about this. If you're sophisticated CI/CD folks, you can, you might understand what's going on here. But really, all we're doing is we're providing command line tools that allow you to hook into Salto functionality from whatever pipeline you're using. And so in this case, it's just a single line in a GitHub action. There are GitLab actions which are very similar, and we would just be part of that process. So and like I said, if you're not here yet, you're not at this stage yet, we can kind of point you in the right direction. We're not going to, Salto is not a consulting company. We don't do all the consulting around, building a full pipeline, but we can get you a lot of the way there. And
You know a guy.
you tell the right codes, and then point to folks like Eric who can take you the rest of it.
That's all
Great.
the questions I have. You're free to get back to what
All
you
right.
wanted to talk about.
I'm just looking at the chat. Is that from the chat too?
No, we're good on the chats at the moment. So
Okay,
you
great.
can
I see
continue.
a couple mentions in the chats about, hey, would love to see a demo. Awesome. I would love to dig in with any one of these fine folks in the audience. And so
Yep.
please do reach out. I'm sure you will get I was going to say pestered, but that might be a little bit untoward. You'll get communicated with by our marketing department, and yeah, I would love to me or one of my colleagues would love to give you a demo on this, either a demo or if it gets to that stage, we do lots of proofs of concept with customers as well. Okay, great. So was there anything else missing here? I think we kind of covered it. So we started with pipelines. We showed that there are these two worlds that want to progress things along. Well, maybe one final thing is that once we have the progression into UAT, I might want to take all of these things. Maybe this is a big sprint that we've been working on, and I'm going to promote all 8 of those things into the next higher environment, into my production environment, and
Yeah.
this is going to be like the Q1 2025 sprint because it's a big sprint or whatever. And
Mhm.
what we do is we compose all of those things into a single deployment for production to go live in production. So we're actually kind of analyzing everything. We're kind of working out all the conflicts. We're going to show you the conflicts that exist, and you're going to be able to resolve them. And then once it all looks the way you want it to look, then you get a final approval to get this thing to go into production, and away you go. So that's another point to make, is that as we're looking at this pipeline, that we can do some fairly broad things, like select all these things. You're going to see this one show up now. This here now is a deployment that represents all of these things that got pushed into UAT earlier, right? And I can see that it's in the state that requires conflict resolution. So I would come in here and I would look at the deployment and say, okay, looks like there's some things I got to go do. Let's view this deployment and resolve those conflicts so that we can move forward. And now this I've got conflicts here because this is demo land, and I do all kinds of, oh, this is this. There's actually not that many conflicts. There's only one conflict. Good, excellent. I was gonna say it's in demo land, and so there are lots of conflict potentials. Actually, let me just go and show you what the conflict resolution looks like. Let me reset that. So conflict resolution, whether it's to production or not, will show you the side by side and what's conflicting, and I can come in here and I can accept that in my source environment, what I want is the things that I'm proposing from the deployment rather than the stuff that already exists. And yeah, so anyway, that's conflict resolution. Now I've composed a bunch of those that sprint into a gigantic deployment, and now I'm ready to push that up into production. And so that's kind of the last step of this is, we've got developers, and let me go back to the screen here. We've got developers and administration folks working in concert with each other. The conductor is here in the big in the cockpit waiting for things to happen, and then the conductor chooses things to promote, creates new promotions out of those, and then we can actually go and conduct those deployments in a unit. Now, where was that thing? Let me go back to that. I'm getting these network errors today, so I'm actually gonna stop where I'm at, because I don't want to test the internet gods any further. I think there's something going on either in our network or on the internet in general. Like I said, Slack wasn't working for me earlier today, so who knows? There's some weirdness going on. But that's kind of the overview, and I think that's probably all I had to talk about from an in-depth perspective. And now, I mean, absolutely, let's open the floor for further
Yeah, we've got
further conversation.
a few more questions, but I do want to point out I love the sort of promotions aspect here, where just because you deployed something from dev to UAT one way doesn't mean you have to deploy it that way again from UAT to production. It's really common to like stack up a bunch of features. In my experience in NetSuite development, stuff tends to pile up in that sandbox environment, and then it all goes to into production all at once on some magic go live date. I'm not
Mhm.
advocating that you do it that way, by the way, but that's a different like a different topic. Um, and so those changes tend to stack up, and they stack up from multiple sources, right? From devs, from admins, from external consultants, maybe from functional consultants, right? We're all sort of in there making changes, but there's very often dependencies between those deployments, and they need to go to production together at the same time. And this lets you do that, right? You can pile up as many features and deployments as you want in that sandbox 2 or that UAT environment or whatever it might be, and then deploy them all to production in one go, and it will resolve all the conflicts, any dependencies, missing dependencies, things like that. Salto will sort of shake all that out for you, and you can deploy to production all at once. So everything goes live together. Sorry, trail off there. We have some questions here. Another one from Alexander. Does Salto also support PDF or HTML templates?
Yes, yes, we do. Yeah, so if I go into one of my environments here, say in dev, and I go into my Explore view, I forget where it is. Is it here? Yeah, so here's some templates, right? So I've got some PDF templates. All of the, wait, is that it? That is not it. Hold on, bear with me. That's my file count. Where are they?
While
There.
he's looking, there is a poll up in Zoom. If you could respond to that.
So here's my is a PDF template. I can see it depends on some on a saved search, for example, right? So this is the other thing about Salto is that it gives you the ability to see dependencies. So here, and by the way, here's the content of that thing. We could edit this in Salto, in an IDE in NetSuite, and then compare that between Dev and UAT and promote the changes up into UAT. So yeah, PDF and HTML templates too.
Fantastic. From Oksana, is there any specific setup that helps Salto listen to changes on a pull request? We have Salto connected to GitHub and Jira, but if
Okay.
a developer makes changes to code in the dev environment, they currently refresh the database so Salto can pull this change.
Interesting.
Probably
There's
some
a couple
missing
ways.
context there, but
Yeah, I get it. It's so sometimes changes are made right in, if I go to my dev, this is my dev environment. Folks sometimes just go right in here and they edit suite scripts right in the dev, right in NetSuite. So not within an IDE. And when those are updated, how can Salto look at those updates and add them to a pull request? It's a really interesting question. There's one way we could remind someone to do that is to set up monitoring. So in Salto, there is this concept of monitoring. I can come into my dev environment and I can set up a monitoring of changes, and I can say, hey, whenever something, okay, sure, I gotta set up a schedule here. Hang on. Whenever something changes in this is like a suite script changes, all right. And so I can come in here and say, all right, when something in the file cabinet changes, or if I have I don't know, let's pick a client script. If a client script ever changes, right, then notify me by email or Slack. So cool. Hang on. Sorry. All right. Notify me by Slack, and so now every time a fetch runs, this pattern will get run, and if the pattern is triggered, then it'll send me an email. So that's one way, is like to monitor your changes in suite scripts, and you can be specific on which suite scripts you want to monitor as well. And then in terms of like changes within NetSuite, it's a good question. I'm not sure how we might tackle that. I'd love to talk more about that through, the best one really good place if you're already a Salto user is to engage us in conversations here. That way, someone will pick it up, and if you're an enterprise account, someone like me will interact with you, and we do have a good support organization as well for everyone else.
A couple more questions here. This one from Josh. How do you feel about automatic deployments, such as from dev to UAT based on pull request approval?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we tend. Do I have any customers doing that? I don't think I have any customers doing that. We've started out doing that once in a while, and it's like, oh, actually, I like the extra check of having to come in here and do an approval, or not an approval, or just a click go. Yes, we absolutely can. The suite, where was it? Oh, it's gone now. But the GitHub Actions, the one I'm using is create a deployment. And that sometimes I can create a deployment upon PR creation, right? So as soon as a PR is created, I create a deployment in Salto for UAT. And then when the PR is approved, then I trigger that deployment. So I've got that set up somewhere else in my demo environment as well. So yeah, we can definitely do the automation of the deployment itself.
And if that PR is updated at any point, the deployment gets updated as well.
Yeah.
I have feelings about this as well, irrespective of Salto. I personally, I do not like or advise automatic deployments in NetSuite, but that's
Yeah.
coming from mostly from a perspective of someone doing account customization projects. So not suite apps, not bundles, not the more fixed like product development.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't like them because NetSuite is a shared deployment target.
Hmm.
There are often other sources of changes coming in. So I like having that manual check uh, ahead of time, being able to compare, show me the differences. That I think that check is really important in NetSuite, especially going to production. Less important in dev. You kind of expect your development environment to be a little bit uh, full of conflicts sometimes. Hopefully not too much, but
Hmm.
so for that reason, I don't like automatic deployments
Yeah.
in NetSuite. But that's coming from a very specific context. If I were on a Suite app team, absolutely, I want to automatically deploy stuff because we have super tight control. Nobody outside of our Suite app is making changes to our Suite app.
Right.
So, but when you have that shared, heavily shared environment, multiple sources making changes in the target account, I don't like auto deployments in that
Yeah.
situation. Great question, Josh. Um, this one from Roy, going back
Hey,
to
Roy.
what I was talking about sort of piling up all those changes and then doing that big deployment all at once.
Yeah.
Let's say you push from dev to UAT, but for whatever reason, then that same big deployment we do fails going to prod or something's
Right.
wrong in that
Yeah.
in that big release. We tried to release 10 features at once, something
Yeah.
goes wrong. What
Sure.
happens?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. It's a great thought. This one actually is ready to go. So, oh, it's got conflict still. Darn it. Okay, never mind. Um, uh, what happens is this will show up as a kind of a partially successful. Let's see if I can find one in my list here. Well, here's one. Here's one. So it didn't work, right? So I don't know what this is. It's an old demo from something or other. But something didn't work. And so I can come back in here. What I can do is let me go back to deployments. I can come into that one. Where was it? It's here. And I can say reuse the selection, which creates another deployment with the same selection. And anything that actually did deploy won't be in there because the comparison filters out anything that's already synchronized, right? So we can do it. We can run the deployment again. There's actually a fix or what's it called now? There's a button in a partially successful deployment. I'm just trying to find one here. It looks like all my deployments are pretty successful. But in a partially successful deployment, what we'll see up here is a button that says retry this deployment. And again, what that'll do is it just creates another deployment with the same selected elements. The ones that worked, they will already be synchronized, and so they simply won't show up in the deployment. And you just run that deployment again, presumably after having sussed out what the issue was and resolved it.
And if something really went wrong, you can go to back to any of the snapshots, any of your previous
Uh,
deployments, and you can
yeah,
push that to the environment while you sort of sort out what went wrong with the old deployment.
yeah. Each one of these fetches, for example, stands as a restore point, and so I can compare February 7th at 2:01 p.m. to today, and what that'll do is it will create a deployment for me that shows me all those diffs, right? It's just going to show me those diffs rather than every difference between the two. So instead of comparing a dev to a UAT, we're comparing prod today to prod on February 7th, and it'll show me the differences, and then I can pick and choose each one that I want. So from a restore perspective, we don't have to do a full restore, of course. We just have to do a partial restore. This is also really helpful, by the way, after refreshes. So if you do a refresh of your dev environment and you had a bunch of stuff in flight, this allows you to restore all that stuff after you do a refresh. So that's also a nice thing, nice feature to have. So these are only the differences that occurred since February 7th. And so now I can pick any one of these and say, all right, there's a suite script difference here. Let me look at my stuff. There was a modification to a suite script. And so this is how it used to look, and I can deploy it to the way this is how it looks today. But I'm gonna deploy it to the way it used to be because there was a bug in the previous one. And here we are with our 500s again. I'm not sure what's going on here, but internet gods are against me. So yes, we can do restores. And the other thing that just really quick, and then I'm gonna shut up because I think we're done, is that my compare and deploys can be in either direction too.
Questions?
If there's some stuff in prod that I want to push back into dev, for example, right? I can take prod and make dev the target and push some hot fixes, for example, from my production environment back into my dev environment just as easily as going the other way around. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that it's a multi-directional tool too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
and
a
one
quick
more. Wait, and then
reminder,
I'll
there
shut up.
is
I
a.
promise.
Oh,
One more
all right.
is that in addition to NetSuite, this also manages Salesforce and Zendesk and Jira and a bunch of others as well. So this is a multi-app platform. We're not just NetSuite. We do support other ones as well. And now I'll shut up. Sorry about that.
No problem. Quick reminder, there's still a closing poll open. If you participate in that, helps us adjust these sessions in the future. Question here from Tom. What are some things that Salto maybe doesn't do well or can't do, doesn't support, or other things we should know about?
Sure. We do everything perfectly. No, there are plenty of places where NetSuite is sufficiently complex and hard to deal with that we have to find workarounds. I was dealing with a customer just yesterday whereas normally we can deploy a form and the form in the target environment will look exactly as it did in the source environment. I know that's a really key feature a lot of people love, but I had this customer, and we still have an issue where we deployed the form and it looked weird on the target environment. So occasionally we run into these corner cases. In this case, it turned out to be a NetSuite. We have a NetSuite case open because we tried it with SDF using XML and we had the same result. So we
Yeah.
do run into corner cases where either it's a Salto deficiency and we find a workaround or we make code changes. We're a very dynamic company. We fix our stuff all day, every day. We have developers churning away at understanding how things work and where the corner cases are and figuring out how to address those corner cases. So yeah, not everything. If you want to go to help.salto.io, that is a good place. If you search for NetSuite supported types, there's a page there on that'll show you exactly which types we do support explicitly, and it's just about everything.
Yeah. It's even a superset of what SDF supports in
Yes,
many
that's true.
cases.
Yeah.
All right. And one more question. I know you haven't answered this. I know I've heard that you tell this story a bunch of times, but from Roy, why the beaver mascot for Salto?
Software developers are busy beavers, and that's kind of where it came from. I forget where like who it was that originated it, but yeah. So busy beavers are kind of the metaphor for software developers and NetSuite admins. They're staying up at all hours of the night making sure things work, and so we're trying to honor that virtue in all of our customers.
Thanks, Roy. And I think that is going to bring us to a close. Thank you, Jeff, for leading us through the demonstration here. Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
everyone in the audience, for joining us. If you have questions or want to sign up for that free, again, 30-day demo of Salto, you can check out salto.io. I think we are done.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. See you later.
My pleasure. Thank you.